Hi, I'm Becky from Crafters Companion and I'm here to show you our foundation paper piece pad which we just brought out, which has got the all these little designs down here. So each one of these pads will have 24 pieces in there. That's 4 of each of these 6 designs. You have a toadstool, a bird, a butterfly, a heart, a birdhouse and also a tulip. In order for you to put those together. It comes with full instructions and you'll have 4 individual sheets of each of those designs for you to make. So the next one we're going to do is the bird. The bird looks like this, and it looks a little bit more complicated because you've got an awful lot of shapes around the eyes, but it's actually very simple. Now you've got 5 separate pieces on this, separate pattern pieces. So this part here forms block A. Then you've got block B, C, D and E round here. But we've given you all of the cutting measurements down here. Now I found the best way of putting them together is by sectioning them off and writing down on each piece of fabric with a heat erasable pen what piece they are. You will find that with some of these, because you've got an awful lot and you've got a lot in the same sort of shape and also the same kind of fabric, it is a lot easier if you can write them all down so you don't get confused. Over here it will say all the details about the kind of fabric that you need and how much, and that's taking into account if you're going to be following our design exactly over here. And then we've got some instructions further on the front of this piece of paper, and also on the rear we've got step-by-step instructions. Now here you'll see your pattern pieces. So you'll need to cut these out just beyond the little dotted lines. So the first section is quite small over here. So you've got A and B, that's the top of the bird. C forms the body of the bird. D is the sort of background and a little bit of the leg, and then E is actually the feet here. So cut all your pieces out so you're ready to start working. So for section A, we've only got 3 pieces of fabric here. So it's relatively quick and easy because it's only forming that front of the beak of the bird. So that's section A. And as always, we're going to start with number 1, A1. So this is the A1 piece of fabric. So we're going to turn the pattern over onto the wrong side, and we're going to place our fabric over the top. Now we want to make sure that the fabric goes around the edge of the shape and leaves us at least 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So if you just lift it up and hold it to the light, you'll be able to see through the fabric and see that pattern piece. So I'm going to use a couple of pins here. And then we're going to find where the A2 shape is, which is just down here. So we're just going to fold over our pattern against that line, which goes against A1 and A2. And we're going to use a rotary cutter and our ruler to trim this. Now my ruler has got an edge, and then from the edge we've got a 1/4 inch increment here. So I'm just going to line that black line up against that fold of the pattern and the fabric, and using my rotary cutter I'm just going to cut off that little edge. Then I'm going to take my next piece, which is A2, which is the one here. I'm going to flip over my pattern and I'm just going to line up that piece against there. So I've just lined up with the edge of A1, and I'm going to put the piece of fabric A2 up against that edge, and I'm going to flip it over, and then we're going to stitch along this line here, just this one here, and we're going to do this in exactly the same way with all of the pieces. So stitch along here first of all, and then we'll take the pin out and we're just going to fold it, finger foot press it down here, and then we're going to find the line between A2 and A3, which is this line here. We'll fold that back on the pattern, and then using our ruler and rotary cutter we're going to trim that 1/4 inch off again. I'm just going to check by folding it this way that it's kind of going to cover the whole of that pattern once we've sewn it together and sort of folded it back on itself. So a pin in there, and then we're going to stitch along this line here. So that forms your little beak of your bird. and the outside, the sort of background piece. Now you'll see that this doesn't sort of follow the shape of that pattern yet because we actually have to trim it. So if I turn it around the other way, I've given it a press already. Now I'm just going to cut along the dotted line that we've got around the edge. So if you've left a little bit of space beyond that dotted line, you can then just trim the paper piece as well, the paper pattern, but I've already cut it fairly close. So I'm just going to cut up until that dotted line. And then your piece is ready for us to sew onto the rest of the design once we get it all finished. So that is section A. So I'll put that to one side for the moment. Then we're going to get on with section B. Now, these are quite tiny, these pieces, and that's when having a glue pen is really useful, because we're going to use a bit of glue on this to secure these pieces together. They're just too small for you to be able to get a pin in there to secure them. So B1 is this tiny little speck here, that's the actual eye of the bird. So we're going to turn our paper pattern over, and we're just going to place our fabric over the top. I'm going to check on the other side. We've got loads of space to make sure we've got the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we're going to put a dab of glue just here, and then we're going to see where B2 is, so B1 and B2, and we're going to fold along this little line here. So turning the paper pattern so it's facing upwards, and folding the little line here on that crease. There is where we're going to line up our ruler and just trim that off. And we're going to take section B2 and we're going to line up the fabric here. Just make sure as it folds over it's going to cover everything. So again, I'm going to use a little bit of glue because these are quite small pieces, and I've just put the glue along where that seam allowance is. Then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch along here, this line between B1 and B2. Now, because we've got lots of small pieces that we're stitching together, I'm just going to be trimming my threads as we go along. Now we've stitched across that little piece, we're just going to fold the white piece of fabric back and finger press that. Then we're going to find the next piece, which will be B3, find out where that is, which is just over in this section here. Once again, we are going to fold the paper pattern along that little line, like so. And then we're going to trim that piece there. I'm going to take the section B3, I'm going to line that up, make sure it's going to cover the piece of the paper pattern once it's folded over. And now this is a little bit bigger, so I'm going to be able to use a pin for this one. I won't have to worry about using the glue. Finger press this out of the way like so. Then we're going to look for the next section, which is B4, which is the one just up here. So again, we're going to fold our pattern over along the line between B4. And then we're going to look for the next section, which is B5, which is the one down here. Again, fold your fabric over. Again, fold your paper pattern over. Then trim. and then you've got that section there. So when we put these two pieces together, you can see you've got the beginning of that little bird. So what we will do is we will put these right sides together, and I'll show you how to sew that along the line here. So we're just going to follow this line, this black line here, and that will stitch it perfectly with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it's a little bit bulky at the moment because you've obviously got the paper in there that you're going to take away. But I'm just going to give it a quick iron at the moment, and obviously when you take your paper out after you've stitched all of the block together, you'll give it another press and you'll find that it's nice and flat. So that's the first section of the little bird. So we're going to continue with the rest of the body of the bird in exactly the same format. So you can see here the one that we've finished. It's just got those other two pieces added at the bottom, but you can see that this fits onto here, and those are the two pieces that you put together. So here you have your fabulous bird ready to pop on your quilt or other projects that you're working from. So this has been another project which has come from the Foundation Paper Piecing Pack from Crafters Companion.